As I continue to go through the Avengers relaunches over the years, and all the number ones and kind of the ways the title kicked off, I've hit perhaps the strangest and most classic simultaneous one, at least since the original, which is Dark Avengers. This was a completely different team. Is really a look at how would a team assemble in the wrong hands with the wrong people. And a pretty interesting concept, so let's get into that. Hey everybody, this is Perch. Dark Avengers came out in 2010, and this was a direct follow-up from Secret Invasion, where basically it hinges off of one plot point that really makes no sense at all. But what followed next was a pretty entertaining look at how teams are formed and what would happen if power got into the wrong hands and what would they do with it. Brian Michael Bendis is, I don't know for sure, but I think his whole pitch for a lot of Secret Invasion and then Dark Reign, the thing that would come after that, was really about this idea of like, what if villains got into the White House or it's funny because Barack Obama was elected president kind of right in this mix as some of this stuff was getting pitched, which was somebody that I think a lot of the writers loved, and yet they really wanted to do this power corrupts, and here's what it means to have an evil team and all the rest. And what's interesting is, I mention this because on the first page of Dark Avengers, as you're getting the recap, you get kind of Barack Obama's hand gesturing to a smiling Norman Osborn, and that was kind of how Secret Invasion wrapped up. Norman Osborn, despite the heroes fighting the Skrulls and bending back this invasion, being superheroes, the guy who got the kill shot on the Skrull Queen was Norman Osborn and his Thunderbolts. Now, the world is immediately indebted as Norman Osborn is the biggest hero in all the world, which is the part that's weird. That's the weird plot point. It doesn't really make any sense. I mean, you've got Thor in there, and you've got Captain America, and you've got Spider-Man. You got all these very recognizable heroes doing heroic things, but for some reason, the entire world is duped into Norman Osborn as the superhero. So that's you have to really suspend disbelief for that bit. But be that as it may, the goal here is that Norman Osborn's going to make his own team Avengers, and of course, he's going to be a dick about it and get all the villains. So we jump right into the threat that's going to come in this comic, and that's Morgan Le Fay. And so we're guiding a little bit of her spying on the dark Illuminati and being villainous. And this is a nice throwback to the Avengers relaunch with Kurt Busiek and George Perez. We're going to use Morgan Le Fay again. That's solid. I like the fact that they're tying to some classic launches in the past. It gives you some anchor, some familiarity for this. But the issue begins as Bendis has become very fond of doing. You get the time skip. So the issue kind of cuts to the chase right at the beginning of saying, here is your new Avengers. And we've got, what looks like, Marvel Boy, okay, the Sentry, he was on the last team. We've got, Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel standing there, kind of costume different, but there she is. We've got some level of Iron Man. It's Iron Man, but he's painted his suit like the flag for some reason. There's Ares, he's on the last team. We got Wolverine, okay, everybody knows him, and Hawkeye, and Spider-Man. So this is a classic team you recognize, right? Well, no. As we get into it, and we time skip back, we've got Norman Osborn kind of checking out the big, weird, gold red vibrator sub that Tony was building. And he's basically announcing with a lot of talking to Miss Victoria Hand, the fact that Shield is being retired. It's going to be Hammer now. For some reason, Norman Osborn has transformed into Tommy Lee Jones. So Tommy Lee Jones is talking to Victoria Hand, who's somebody, I'm sure. But anyway, they're talking about changes are being made. Norman Osborn's going to fire Maria Hill. Maria Hill is screw you to him. She's going to go off and help Tony Stark and Iron Man. That's where her arc is going to head. But basically, we're seeing Norman Osborn start to exert his control, and we see Maria Hill predict, this is all going to come apart for you. And then we proceed to Norman Osborn basically recruiting his Avengers. And the first one we get is he's recruiting members of the Thunderbolts. So here is Bullseye. He's like, we want you to live in Avengers Tower. Bullseye's surprised. We see Norman Osborn basically trying in a half-hearted way to recruit Miss Marvel. but she's a no. And Norman reveals that Ares and Sentry have signed on board. She's pissed, because why are you doing this? How are you betraying me? They're basically like, hey, we're here to fight battles and mess things up. I don't know. This guy is a hero, right? We set up the dynamic that Ares and Sentry are not villains. They're just, Sentry's confused because he's a mental case, and Ares is basically here to do a job. And, the boss changed, but there's still a job to be done. He's not looking at it in terms of good and evil. So that's a really interesting dynamic to play with. But as Carol, breaks through the window, it's weird, by the way. I've always thought this. We have a lot of commentary about how we want to make Captain Marvel, a major character. We don't want her to be a sex symbol. We want her to be, a person to look up to. Little girls can look up to it. But yet, many of the panels are drawn with her butt. Like there's one in particular where her butt's just, it's shown from the perspective of her butt. And it's a nice looking butt. What's going on here? There's nothing wrong with her butt. But if you're going to promote that she's, shouldn't be seen that way, then maybe you shouldn't draw her this way. And eventually they get around to having a new costume, of course, and they draw her differently. But this was part of the awkward time when they were elevating Captain Marvel as a character who can do it all, who's a really, person to look up to, role model. But they're still drawing her for several years with her butt out. So it is what it is. Norman Osborn immediately discovers, hey, blondes are all the same. He throws the Miss Marvel costume to Moonstone and says, you're now Miss Marvel. And they have a little bit of back and forth. Tommy Lee Jones is like, welcome to the Avengers. And, Moonstone's kind of thinking about it. But, she's there. And then we wander on over to basically Mac Gregorian, who's Scorpion, is got the Venom symbiote, and the symbiote is basically in charge of the show. And they feed him a Skrull, because, why not? He needs to eat. And then Tommy Lee Jones gives him something to eat that basically settles down his, crazy urges or something. Basically tries to, get things a little bit more under control. What is this thing he eats? I don't know. It's something. It makes him, it's like Advil. He gives him some Advil and, or Adderall. It's more like Adderall. He gives him some Adderall, and then, Venom kind of gets under control, and, we get a nice throwback to Secret Wars, where Spider-Man's given the pose in his new costume, and, Tommy Lee Jones has a new Spider-Man, and then goes to recruit Daken. And so by this point in the comic, you're aware that the people we saw at the beginning are clearly not the really people they say they are, and that's the whole, gimmick of the title. So Daken comes into a bar. He recruits him at Pizza Express. A couple of weird panels where Daken is, pushing open doors. This has happened a few times in the comic where people are bowing, like Maria Hill earlier is bowing, or Daken's pushing open a door, but the way the door is drawn, he's pushing on nothing. It's just there's some weirdness to it. But that's, it is what it is. So Tommy Lee Jones basically, convinces Daken that, if he wants to piss off his dad, he'll join the Avengers, and that seals the deal. And then finally he goes to get Marvel Boy from prison in the cube and say, you're the Avengers. So everybody assembles in the tower, and they're going to be, they're still missing some element. There's still a thing. And Ares, for whatever reason, Ares has the answer. This would have been better coming from Moonstone, but that's fine. Ares is saying, teams need like a Captain America and an Iron Man. The symbolism, the soldier in the night. These are more than just men. This is what you need. And so Norman's like thinking about this. He enlists the Ghost to go and open up the Tony secret vault, and there inside are tons of Iron Man armors. That's his hall of armors. So they're all excited about this, and they what is going to happen now? So we get a brief flashback, and this kind of ties us back to the beginning of the issue. Dr. Doom's being escorted back to screwed up Latvernia. And he's immediately attacked by Morgan Le Fay, and this is going to set up the conflict of our first little arc here with Doom and Morgan Le Fay and what's going to happen. But before we get to that, that's going to happen, play out in issues 2 and 3. We get back to the reveal, and Iron Man, the one who had the American flag all painted over him, takes off the helmet. It is Tommy Lee Jones, and he approves of these Avengers, and this is your new team. So This comic, again, it felt a lot of classic kind of building a team aspects. There was not really a lot. There was not really action that took place here. It was mainly just assembling the team for later hijinks. And Dark Avengers in general would be a lot of assembling team for hijinks, not a lot of there's limited action. They do definitely get into some of this with Morgan Le Fay and Doctor Doom, but at the same time, there's also a lot of talking and thinking and kind of the team being dysfunctional, and that's the ride you're on. This is a dysfunctional team with dysfunctional people, and bad things are going to happen because it's dysfunctional. Moonstone's going to sleep with everyone. The new Avengers are going to kind of mess with people. And this thing is a ticking time bomb. The Sentry's unstable. It's going to be a problem for everyone. Norman Osborn is out of his depth. But we do get about 12 issues of kind of some fun, hilarity before it all goes to hell. We get a pretty nice sequence with the Molecule Man that is interesting. We get a crossover with Utopia. Much like Mighty Avengers, this comic suffered a little bit from the fact that it was clearly a stopgap, and as a result, it just kind of wandered a little bit, and you could never fully embrace the team. If you like this book, if you like this dynamic, you also had to know that in a year's time, the book's going to go away and it's going to be replaced by a different book. And once again, it feels like the meat in a event sandwich of bread, and that's not necessarily the best thing to do. That's not the best plan for a book because it does train the users. It trains people that these books are all temporary. And if you look back at this era, kind of this 2008 2012 era, you saw a lot of signs that the comics were all migrating to brief runs, kind of filler between events, and that was the model that Marvel was moving to, and it really comes across here in this comic. The difference is you still had a talent. I mean, Mike Deodato is a major talent at Marvel at this point. Brian Michael Bendis, of course, is running the world, and so you do have this work to some extent because the top books are getting the top talent and thus structuring it. And if you fast forward to today, what you have are a lot of relaunches with not the top talent, with kind of either random names for new artists, or maybe even worse, the new expectation has been set that one of the top writers is getting a top artist for 2 issues, but then it's going to vanish into a cheaper artist, and that's how it's going to get done. And so this was the start of an era at Marvel that probably wasn't the best, to put it mildly, and that's kind of how this all rolled out. But anyway, did you like Dark Avengers? Did you like what came out of this? It did provide a very unique look. I have to give Bendis credit. The idea of what would happen if a villain and somebody who didn't deserve it got Avengers powers, and what would they do with it, and how would that roll out to the world? I think that's a cool concept, and I did like how it kind of played out here, other than some of the aftermath, and what it created was not the best, in my opinion. But what do you think? Let me know your comments below. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Let me know. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please subscribe. Would appreciate it. Introduce to friends. That would be awesome as well. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.